All right. I believe I am streaming now. Let's see. Yep, I'm streaming. All right, so in this video, I'm going to rank every 3D printer filament that I have ever purchased on my Amazon account. So I went through my Amazon account since I had it going back as far as 2019 and looked at every 3D printer filament I have ever purchased, and I'm going to rank them in this live stream. So let's start with one that I can recognize just by looking at these pictures. So let's do the YX Polyur uh, PPS filament. Um, this filament I've got recently to do some testing with for the 3D printed molds that I do. It's $70 a spool, so pretty pricey. But as far as PPS goes, it's actually cheaper than other PPS filaments out there. And this is the only one that I could find that didn't have the carbon fiber reinforcement. On their advertisements for this filament, they state you can print it on a Bamboo X1C or P1S. I think the P1S is the enclosed one. I've found that almost to be the case. I could not get it to print well on my X1C, and I actually had to go and find a QDQ1 Pro on Facebook Marketplace to be able to print this filament. But once I got it printing on the Q1 Pro, it printed well. And I would say not quite as advertised, but there's nothing wrong with the filament itself if your printer can handle it. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in B tier. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put it in C tier just because of the false advertising. The filament itself, probably B tier. Alright. Next, let's do this one. So this was, let me consult my cheat sheet. This one was the Z-Rui, that's ZI-RUI-PETG glow-in-the-dark color-changing filament. This stuff, I really like this filament. It prints really, really well. It was a little bit pricier, but my phone case that I designed in CAD and I've been using for, I don't know, the last probably 6 months every day, I printed in this filament. It prints very well. The glow in the dark and the color changing part of the filament, super cool, works really well. It is a little bit pricier than other PETGs, but what you're getting with the color changing and the glow in the dark, I'd say it's well worth it. So I'm actually gonna put that in S tier because that's one of my favorite PETG filaments for that type of thing out there. All right, next we've got the YX Polyur polycarbonate filament. So, this filament, it doesn't say outright, but I think this is a blend of PC and PETG, that's polycarbonate and PETG filament. And I say that because this polycarbonate filament is a lot more brittle than other polycarbonate filaments I've printed with. It does print well. First off, it does print well, prints dimensionally accurate. It's more brittle for some reason, noticeably so, and even in its unprinted state, just as the filament, you can notice and pick that up. So, being that it does print well, and I believe it's on the cheaper side of polycarbonate filaments. At least it was when I bought it. Um, I'm gonna put it in B tier. All right, what else we got? So this is YX Polyur. That's either PP or no, that's the nylon. That's the YX Polyur nylon filament. This is a pure nylon filament. Most of the nylons you see out there are some kind of glass fill or carbon fiber blend, but this stuff is pure nylon. And with that, it has all the challenges of printing a pure nylon filament. I never made it through the full spool of this. I think I have most of this on the spool left. I remember I don't print nylons a lot. I struggle to print them because of all the things you need to do with them, keeping them dry and all that. I don't remember anything being wrong with this filament other than the difficulties of the nylon that you just have with that. So I'm going to put that in probably B tier. All right. Next up, we have the Yusu polypropylene filament, if I remember right. Let me take a look here. Yeah. Yusu. Yeah, polypropylene. So the Yusu polypropylene, I remember having a strange like texture to it when I was trying to print it. Polypropylene is a difficult filament to print, even more so than nylon, just because it does not stick to anything on the bed. But I remember this stuff having really poor layer adhesion and being crumbly. And I remember polypropylene is supposed to have good layer adhesion. So for that reason, I'm going to put this in D tier, because I don't remember that stuff even being usable. Alright, next up, we have the Yusu PLA. I'm sorry, no, that's Yusu PETG, looking at my cheat sheet. Yusu PETG. I remember this stuff also being pretty crappy filament. I like to print my PETG hotter and faster than recommended print settings, and I remember this stuff just blobbing up and not being able to handle the print settings that I typically print PETG at. I remember slowing it down and being able to get it to print. So it is a usable filament, but it couldn't quite hang with the other PETGs that I've used. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Alright, next up, this is Welshow 3D polycarbonate filament. This stuff, it's a polycarbonate blend of something. It doesn't say what, but I can tell you it's definitely a blend just by the feel of the filament. If I had to guess, I'd say maybe polycarbonate mixed with PLA, because it's got kind of a PLA, like that PLA texture that you would get out of the test spool of filament that you might get with an Ender 3. It is cheap at like $21 a spool, I think, something like that. But this is the only filament in my years and years of 3D printing experience that I've ever had metal shards in the filament get stuck in my nozzle and clog it. So for that reason, I'm going to give it D tier. I will say I ordered 4 spools of it. The rest of the spools seem to be printing actually pretty well. But those, you just, metal shards in the filament, I mean, come on. That tells me it's probably an industrial recycling grade filament, where these companies will get regrind scrap from companies that are using whatever plastic for like injection molding type thing and then turn it into filament. That's probably what this is, and that's why there was metal shards in it, if I had to guess. But even if you're doing that, there's ways around to get that type of crap out of there, and that's just not acceptable. And the list I'm using doesn't have F tier, so that's D tier. That's F tier filament, really. That's like FF tier, if you ask me. All right, next up, this is Tech Bear's PETG filament. I remember this stuff's cheap. It's like $40 for 4 rolls of it. It comes in a pack of 4. You can't. I don't think you can buy it in an individual pack. Only in packs of 4. This was my go-to PETG filament for doing my injection molding fishing lures for a while. Pretty much up until I switched to doing polycarbonate for the injection molds, I was using this stuff. I don't know exactly how many, but I've probably gone through like 20 rolls of this stuff, and it just prints, and it prints well, just as well as any other PETG I've tried, at least for what I'm doing with it, the injection molding fishing lures. So being that the price is really cheap, and it was my go-to PETG for probably all of last year, at least the majority of last year, I'm putting it in an S tier. Alright, what's next? Let's see. Can I... Which one was that? Which one was that? Aha. Okay. According to my list, that is the Sunlu, the Sunlu Shiny PLA. So this, I bought this quite some time ago, and I think I actually have a spool with a little bit left on it. But Shiny PLA is what today would be called Metallic PLA, or it's basically the PLA that has a shine to it. It's really high gloss, for really, this is purely for things that need to look good and not function. And I remember this filament strung really, really badly. That might have been due to moisture problems, and I remember buying this when I was kind of still newer to 3D printing. Maybe not necessarily new, but not 3D printing as much back then. Overall, would I buy this filament again? No, it doesn't fit the purposes that I use it for, and it's stringier than regular PLA. Unless you got a reason for the using the shiny PLA, I wouldn't recommend it. But it still prints, if you got your settings dialed in. So I'm gonna put it in C tier. Next up, Sunlu regular PLA, and most of the PLAs I'm gonna be talking about are PLA Plus variants. I almost never buy regular PLA, only PLA Plus, just for the additional, I'll say, real world performance capabilities of PLA Plus over regular PLA. But the Sunlu PLA Plus was my go-to PLA Plus for a while. That's why I bought this 10 pack of them. I think the 10 pack I got on sale for like $100 to $110. Regular Sunlu PLA, if you're going to buy the individual roll of it's probably anywhere from 15 to 20, depending on the color. There wasn't anything particularly, I would say, that put it far above any of the other PLAs that I've tried. It was just a consistent PLA filament, and it printed well. And nothing else really stood out to me enough that I would say I have to buy this PLA for what I want to do with it. So for that reason, I'm going to put the Sunlu PLA Plus in A tier. Alright, next we have Sunlu PETG filament. The Sunlu PETG, I remember not liking quite as much as the PLA. I remember having more problems, particularly with bed adhesion with Sunlu PETG than the other PETGs I've tried printing with in the past. But once I got the bed adhesion problem worked out, just with, I think it was just glue stick and dialing the bed temp up on the 5M a little bit higher. It printed fine. So being that, you know, I wasn't particularly impressed by it, but it's still perfectly good filament, I'm going to put it in B tier. Alright, moving on. The next one is Strong Hero Rainbow PETG. I remember this stuff is a little bit pricier than other PETGs because it's got the rainbow filament going on. I think it was about 25 bucks a spool if I remember right. And I also remember this stuff printed really well. And I remember really liking the color and the translucence color of this filament when I was printing with it. So it prints really well. It is a little bit pricier. I think that's just because it's the rainbow color. Nothing particular about it stands out to me to justify it being a little bit pricier than other stuff out there, other than the rainbow color. So even though it prints really well from what I remember, and I really did like that translucence. Just because it's a little bit pricier than other stuff, I'm going to put it in B tier. Alright, next up we have Soriatech PET CF. That's similar to PETG, but it's a little bit different of a polymer. PETG is PET with a glycol added to the polymer chain, glycol molecule added to the polymer chain, and that gives it a little bit different characteristics, where PET is more temperature resistant, but I believe it's also more brittle. But the Soriatech PET CF, I remember I've printed actual fixturing for where I work at out of this filament. So I use this stuff where other people might use nylon carbon fiber, because it's easier to print. This stuff does not absorb moisture. I've had it out in a room on a spool and thrown it on the printer. I think they recommend to dry it out, but I didn't have to. I keep a dehumidifier running in that room, and that's well enough for what I'm doing. This stuff's like 35. I think it's between 35 to 40 bucks a roll, which is cheap for engineering grade filament, which is what this is. Like I said, I print actual usable fixtures for work out of this stuff on my home personal printer. This is an S tier filament, 100% all day. You can use this stuff in place of carbon fiber nylons in a lot of places, not everywhere, a lot of places though. It's easier to print with, and it's cheaper. So for that reason, that's an S tier filament all day. Alright, moving on. Next, SaneSmart Rapid PETG. I remember this stuff came waterlogged out of the vacuum packed spool, and it did not print well until I dried it for quite some time. And I think that's because it's rapid PETG. Rapid PETG absorbs moisture more than regular PETG, considerably more than regular PETG. And then I did some testing, and I have a video on my channel about this where I explore this filament in comparison to regular non-rapid PETG, and does it even make a difference? And on my printers with the high flow nozzle setups, it doesn't make a difference. And this stuff, it did print well once I dried it out, I will say, but being completely waterlogged out of the vacuum seal, that's, to me, isn't acceptable. Maybe if it was a nylon, but I don't know. I just don't like dealing with extra steps to have to print filaments when I'm not gaining anything out of it. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. It's not like this stuff was completely unusable after I dried it, but just that extra step for no extra gain, and being that it also, I believe, cost more than other PETGs, with no benefit and actually performing a bit worse, I would say. I could argue D tier, but the stuff I have in D tier right now, I would say was completely unusable. And this stuff was at least usable, so for now, I'm going to leave it in C tier. Next up, we have Pryline Rosewood PLA filament. I did not print much of this filament, but enough to remember that you need to dry it because of the wood. And it strung quite a bit because of that. I didn't dry it the first time I tried it, and I went back and dried it, and it was fine. Was a little bit pricier naturally because of the wood fill. I remember not being particularly blown away with the color, but I wasn't necessarily disappointed. It just all around was meh, type thing. Not necessarily disappointed. Would I buy it again if a project came up where I needed it for something? Probably. So I'm gonna say, you know what? I'm reevaluating my choices. I'm gonna put that in C tier. Yeah. And some of these, I definitely would not put those two on the same level, but this feels like a B tier, and the Strong Hero, I'm going to move up to A tier, the Strong Hero up to A tier, and I'm going to move this up to B tier. That feels more right to me. Okay. I like that. Next up, Pryline TPU filament. I do not print a lot of TPU filament, but this stuff, in summary, I can say it printed well for what I wanted to do with it. I remember struggling with it a little bit. TPU, again, has to be dried. It's one of those filament that absorbs moisture, which I don't particularly like having to deal with that. It's just the nature of the beast with some of these types of filaments, though. I don't remember where it was at on cost particularly. I want to say around the 25 to 30 range. Would I buy it again if I was looking for TPU filament? I'd probably go with the cheapest, maybe not the cheapest, but would I buy that brand of TPU again, being that it was a little bit pricier, and I'm guessing there's cheaper stuff out there? Probably not. I'm gonna put that in probably B tier. That feels okay to me because there was nothing really wrong with it. It's just I don't know if I would, that would be my first choice if I was to buy TPU again. Alright, next up, let's consult the cheat sheet and see which one that is. Okay. Pryline CF polycarbonate. Alright. Is that the polycarbonate or is that... Oh no, that's PETG. That one's the polycarbonate. This one's the CF PETG by Priline. Um, a lot of people, maybe not a lot of people, but I know certain people out there really like the the carbon fiber PETG. Um, for me, if you're using carbon fiber filament, you're using it for a functional reason, and anything that carbon fiber PETG is going to do, carbon fiber PET is going to do better. And I I want to say the PET is only marginally more expensive. Where the carbon fiber PETG you might be able to find $30 a spool, where this P the PET CF is maybe 35 to 40, call it $37 a spool. So for that reason, I'm gonna put it in B tier because again, nothing necessarily wrong with it, but there are better options out there. Um, the other thing I remember with this filament was it needing to dry it out. I don't know if that's normal for other PETG CF filaments, but I remember I having to dry this filament out because tried to print it once after having it sit out and it was waterlogged. So keep that in mind if you're going to print PETG CF filament. You may need to dry it out or reseal it. Where I do not have that problem with PET CF. So, personally, I don't think I'd ever seek out carbon fiber PETG. I'm going with the PET CF over that any day. All right, next up, Priline carbon fiber polycarbonate filament. Now, this stuff, I remember being able to print this stuff without an enclosure. Now, if I remember right, it's still warped, but not bad enough where it was unprintable without an enclosure. Now, this was an Ender 3 style printer back then. I remember putting a hardened steel nozzle on it and not having an enclosure at the time that I bought this to try to print with it. And I remember I was able to print the part off I wanted to print in this, which I think speaks to that filament's printability. Because I know I've tried printing other polycarbonate filaments without an enclosure and they just warp and will not stick, period. So I'm going to put this stuff actually in A tier. Just because of that fact alone. I do remember it being a little more pricey, around the $40 range, but engineering type grade filament, you're going to have that. How it compares against PET, the PET CF, it's still, the PET CF is still easier to print, and for a lot of applications, I think is going to be just fine. I don't think you're going to need the polycarbonate for that. So for that reason, I'm going to put that in A tier, and the PETCF is king in S tier. All right, moving on. Next we have Polymaker Tough PLA. First and foremost, this is a pricey PLA. This stuff I want to say is around $35 a spool for a 750 gram reel of PLA. That's pricey for PLA. Now, that being said, this stuff is unlike any other PLA I have printed. Um, it's impact resistance far and above any other PLA plus, certainly regular PLA that's out there. I wouldn't quite consider it an engineering grade filament because their PLA just doesn't have the temperature resistance that other filaments have. But this is as close to an engineering grade filament and PLA that you're gonna get. So if for some reason, like you're limited in your printer skill, ability, just what your printer can print, and you're limited to PLA and you're looking for some high level performance out of that PLA functionally, I would recommend this stuff. Being that it's so much pricier, and for the price you can get real engineering grade filaments. I don't know if I'd put it in S tier. I, you know, I am gonna put it in S tier just because of how much better it is than regular PLA. So with that in mind, I know you can get high performance filaments out there, but if you don't want to mess with the specialty filaments and everything that comes along with that, I'm gonna rank that S tier. Now you're gonna pay for it, um, but if your application demands it, it's justified. So next we have, I think that's going to be Polymaker PETG. Let's see. Yeah, Polymaker Tough PETG. This stuff. So this stuff I remember prints well. Also pricey when it comes to PETG. I want to say it was around that. It was a little bit pricier than the PLA, if I recall correctly. Around $40 a spool for $38-40 a spool for this stuff, and these prices might be outdated by a year or two. And it just didn't offer really. It wasn't as drastic of a change from a regular PLA to the the Polymaker Tough PLA than it was from a regular PETG to this stuff, and you're paying more than twice what you would pay for a regular spool of PETG. So being that there's no real performance advantage, at least for what I was using it for, and just the drastic price increase, I'm gonna give this C tier. Okay, moving on. Polymaker Polycarbonate Tough Filament. Now, this stuff is going to be around that $40 price point, might be a little bit more than 40. This is an engineering grade filament. Engineering grade filaments come at a premium. And this is certainly, I will say, there is a definite different higher quality feel to this stuff than the other polycarbonate filaments I have on this list. If you remember the Welshow polycarbonate down here that was D tier, where I mentioned it had that PLA-y feel to it. This stuff, totally different feel to it. I can't quite describe it, but it's totally different, higher quality. I'm gonna put it in A tier because definitely higher quality filament than this PETG. I wouldn't quite put it in S tier just because I don't think it necessarily did anything spectacular that it warrants being an S tier. Um, but it is I would rank that higher as a filament than some of these other ones. All right, so what else do we got? Polymaker regular PETG filament. Okay, so this stuff is a little bit more pricey than the other PETGs. I want to say around $25 a spool for this. And it didn't, similar to the tough PETG, that increased price point versus other PETG filaments where no, I would say there's no real improvement over the cheaper stuff to justify it, where it's similar performance, at least for what I'm doing with it. Um, it's not going to be my first choice for PETG. Um, where the Tech Bears was just because of the price point, and it printed just fine and worked just fine for what I was doing with it, being the injection molded fishing lures. Um, it is a fine filament, so I'm gonna put it in B tier for just the price reason. Um, Even if it was, maybe a couple bucks more than the Tech Bears, I'd put it a little bit higher. But I don't think they can justify what they're charging for it against other PETGs that are out there. All right, what do we got next? Overture PETG. This is going to be a $15 to $20 spool of filament. PETG. I'm not going to have a whole lot to say about it. It works fine. It prints just like a lot of the other PETGs I've used. Lower price than the Polymaker stuff. Prints similarly. I'm going to put it in B tier. All right. What do we got next? Landu PETG. All right, this stuff was around the $11 to $12 price point for a roll of PETG, printed just as well as the Polymaker or Overture stuff. I wouldn't hesitate to buy it again. Not necessarily my first choice because there's other PETGs that print virtually the same as this stuff, that are cheaper. But it is a good option, and it prints well at a cheap price. Not quite as cheap as the Tech Bear stuff, but almost. So I'm gonna put it in A tier. All right, up next, King Rune PLA Plus filament. Now this stuff is a cheap PLA filament. Um, I remember the physical properties of this filament being similar to the Sunlu, and it's a similar price to the Sun Pack spool. Um, I remember the gray spool specifically had bed adhesion issues where the others did not. think my sound is back on now. Okay, yeah. I heard my microphone beep. So I'm good now. Anyway, yeah. It might be a fine filament, but I can't rank it any better than D tier for that reason. What do we got next? Let's see. Elegoo Rapid PLA. I have no strong feeling about this filament one way or another. I'm going to put it in B tier. It prints just like, any other PLA. Or you know what? The one thing I will say about this printer, I've got an Ender 3, an old original Ender 3 that I put Clipper on and has that, I'll call it a standard flow nozzle. It's not a high flow nozzle. The Rapid PLA filament, I can print faster on that specific printer than my other ones. Then I should say standard PLA. That's not enough for me to call it anything other than a B tier. I'm sorry. It doesn't jump out at me, and I wouldn't necessarily be my first choice to buy it for anything again. So, okay, up next, Elegoo Regular PLA Plus. I'm just gonna throw it in there for the same reason. It's a regular old PLA. You're gonna get similar performance to anything else out of it, then can't really say anything higher than a B tier for that one. Alright, next up, Elegoo PETG. Again, this one didn't stand out to me in particular strongly anywhere or another. Middle of the road price, middle of the road performance. I'm going to give it a B tier. Next up, we've got Duramic PLA. I think this was the Duramic Tough PLA. I remember this stuff feeling quite a bit different than other PLA Pluses. Not really deserving of an A tier or B tier. Middle of the road price, middle of the road filament, middle of the road performance. I'm going to give it B tier. Next up, Creality PETG. I can't really say anything other than it's lower in price at around the $12-13 mark, similar to the Kangaroo stuff. It prints similar to the Kangaroo stuff. I got the Kangaroo stuff in A tier. This is a cheaper PETG that prints well. I'm gonna put it in A tier. Next up, this is let's see, Comgrow PETG Plus. This stuff I purchased for $9.99 a spool. So same price per spool as the Tech Bear stuff, prints just the same as any of these other PETGs that I've got on here that I didn't specifically say prints poorly. So given that low price point and comparable printability, I'm going to put it in S tier. Alright, what else we got? This is CC 3D polycarbonate filament. So CC 3D polycarbonate filament, this stuff's on the cheaper end of filament. Polycarbonate filaments at $25 a spool. Also had that kind of weird PLA feel to it. I've printed 3 rolls of this stuff now with no adverse effects on my printers. This stuff does tend to warp more than other polycarbonates I've tried printing with. Given the low price points, I can live with that most of the time. I'm gonna put it in I'll put it in B tier. Next up, let's see. Braschem polypropylene carbon fiber filament. All I can say is this stuff is an engineering grade filament, around 45 to 50 bucks a spool. All the challenges of printing the polypropylene stuff had better layer adhesion than this stuff down there. Unless you have a very specific application where you need the polypropylene and carbon fiber, there's not really a reason to buy it, but there's nothing wrong with it necessarily, so I'm going to say B tier unless you really need the polypropylene for some reason. It's a fine filament. Nothing necessarily wrong with it. Most people aren't going to be buying it. Next up, Anycubic PETG. Similar price points and performances to all the other PETGs up here. I'm going to stick it up in A tier. Alright. Next up, let's see. The Acidity PETG. This stuff was $10.50 a spool. Prints just as well as all these ones at a couple bucks less in price. Is that enough to get it? I've already got this. You know what? These don't deserve S tier. Those are going to be A tier, and this is going to be A tier. Because those are all comparable, and I don't want to load S tier with 3 different PETGs just because they're cheap. So for that reason, moving those down to A tier. Those are all A tier. I'm going to leave these in A tier as well because a couple bucks difference in price. You can shuffle them around. They're interchangeable with each other, so those are all A tier now. Alright, let's see. Let's see here. 3D Holger PLA. I have not actually printed with this filament, so I'm just going to throw it in B tier. I've got a full spool of it sitting down there. It was cheap, around $10 a spool. So what else we got? 3D Holger PETG. This stuff, similar to the Yusu stuff down here, couldn't quite hang with the other PETGs in terms of temperature and speed that I tend to print them at. So I'm going to put that in C tier. It was cheap, but I'm not going to buy it again. And then I've got the PLA up there twice for some reason. I'll just throw that in B tier. And then what was that one? 3D Best -Q PCTG. Okay, so the PCTG, I want to say this stuff was around 30 bucks a spool. It didn't offer me anything that PETG couldn't. And the increase in price over PETG, at least for what I'm doing with it, wasn't really justified. Nothing wrong with the filament. I do remember it warping and having bed adhesion problems on a non-enclosed printer. You don't have that problem with PETG. I'm gonna throw it in C tier. Maybe there's something out there where you would need PCTG over PETG, but I wouldn't go out of my way to buy it again. So that's my ranking list that I've got. That's what I came up with. So thanks for watching, and have a good one.